I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship.
Something stupid is coming out of his mouth.
I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name.
Let's talk about something good about Justin Freck. What are you doing?
The season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football.
This guy is a bonehead. They love him.
I question your judgment as an adult. I really do.
I was a total hater. I know that for a fact, and I just don't get it.
Get us back our sleeves.
And say, bring me that. That's the one I want. Appreciate you guys so much for joining me. It's Chuck. Last Monday or Tuesday, I had my buddy Chris Drew from Menace to Sports on here with me, and Chris and I were talking post-mortem Michigan. And devastating loss, obviously. 4 years in a row the Buckeyes lose, but it's more than that. They didn't play the game in 2020, which means the last time we saw Ohio State win this game was November of 2019. The next time we see them play will be November of 2025, which means when Ohio State goes up into Ann Arbor to play a better Michigan team than they lost to this year, with a team that won't be probably as talented at Ohio State next year, it will have been 6 years since we have seen Ohio State beat them. Now that is unfathomable to me as a guy who grew up through the Cooper era and then saw everything turn on its head with Jimmy T. 2 straight decades of pure dominance to the point where I was one of those dummy fans. And I know some of you hate me and hate people like me, but there was a time throughout that 2 decades where I thought, man, I miss this game being a little more competitive. I miss the feeling that I used to get, the extreme fear and the anxiety, because for a little stretch there, I mean, that was always there, right? That never goes away, but it wasn't like it was when I was younger with John Harold Cooper. And I kind of missed it. Now I sure feel like an idiot. That's no doubt about it. I admit it. I'm a fool for that. I definitely was a fool for that. But when we talk about, some people bring up, Ryan Day is not 1-4 against Michigan. He's really 2-4 because Michigan ducked the game in 2020. And up until a week and a half ago, I used to feel pretty much the same way. However, after we just saw his team lose at home as a 3-touchdown favorite, and the way they lost and the look in his eyes at the end of that game, the last 2 minutes of the game, the mismanaged clock, I don't think that it's really reasonable to say that we know for sure that's what would have happened in 2020, despite the huge talent advantage. That talent advantage was there this year. They were huge favorites this year. You can't chalk up a game that didn't happen as a win for him anymore, because it certainly looks like this is a head game with him. So I can't say that anymore. But, if you do, whatever. The point is he's lost 4 in a row, and that there's a whole swath of Buckeye fans who were on the fence and were supporting Ryan Day and riding for Ryan Day, who are 1 foot out on him. And they're basing that second foot on what happens here in these playoffs. And everybody knows that, from the media to the administration. There's a lot who have already jumped out based on that game. There were some that were out before then. I think the people that were out before this season were a little unreasonable, a lot unreasonable, to be honest, because I felt like this year he made all these changes going into the season, and it was only fair to give him a bit of a reset button to see what he could do with all these changes. Giving up play calling was huge. Not just letting somebody else call the plays, his baby. He didn't want to do that. You know what I mean? He went all in on trying to raise funds, got really good at it, was making calls himself to bring in big donors. Like, that stuff doesn't seem like it's in his nature. And he went out and did it to make the team better. Brought in Julian Sayin over top Aaron Nolan, something that was very hard for him. Just a lot of changes. And I felt like it's only fair that, we give him a little more grace because he's made some changes and wasn't just banging his head against the wall doing the same thing. We see so many coaches do that. He didn't. But a lot of people at the beginning of the season said, if he loses to Michigan, he better at least make it to the national championship game or I'm out. And I felt like that was fairly reasonable to say. But I also felt like it was a stupid discussion to have, because there was no way he was going to lose to this Michigan team. And that was preseason when I assumed they would be an 8-4 team, maybe 9-3. Certainly not as bad as they were. But when we saw how bad they were, my opinion started to change. Like, you absolutely have to win that game. You have to win that game. And when I saw the way he lost, it sure changed a lot for me. It changed a lot. Changed a lot of the way I thought about him. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. Now, how do you erase the sting of that? You're not gonna. But it certainly will feel a hell of a lot better if he can get his team together, regroup, win a massive home game against Tennessee. And that game's going to be so exciting. I cannot wait for it. Move on to play a revenge game against Oregon. You beat that Oregon team. Tennessee at home, and then Oregon to knock them out of the playoffs, the team that's undefeated, been number one most of the year, and you knock them out. At that point, that Michigan game stings a whole lot less, and it almost feels like it's in its own category. We'll deal with it when we got to deal with it, but it stings a whole lot less. Now, the following game, most likely, if it goes chalky, would be Texas, in Texas. A massive game. What if he wins that game? Can you imagine? Now, I've talked to a lot of people. I've run a lot of polls, and people who have their foot out the door, 1 foot out the door, if he does that, gets past Oregon, gets to Texas, maybe puts a game on with them, maybe loses, but plays good, rallies the team for a couple of wins here in the playoffs. After that loss, they're like, okay, I'm back in. And I think that more people will be back in than even think so. Like, they may not feel so now, but after watching that, watching him beat Tennessee, watching him beat Oregon, I think a lot of people, even though they don't feel like they would be back in, would be back in. But that's not what this video is about. I guess it kind of is. The video is about Ross Bjork and the media who Ross Bjork has come out and done a media tour this week. Now, Ross Bjork has said everything a proper leader should, right? His head coach is going into the playoffs. He's going to support him and double down in every possible way he can. That's what a leader does. That's what he's expected to do. He wants to give the head coach and the team and the donors and the recruits and the guys in the transfer portal the utmost confidence that he supports his coach 100%. He has to do that. What he does not have to do is attempt to move the goalpost of an Ohio State head coach. And I fear that's what he's trying to do here. And I listened to most of his media hits, but it was all the same talking points. He said the same thing in every one, except for one. And I was getting some nasty comments from some people about Ross Bjork, didn't know what they were referring to. And then I got sent the link of what they were referring to from my buddy. And he was discussing the game. And he's discussing the game on the podcast, which is interesting because last week when Chris and I were talking post-mortem on the show, he brought up to me Jeremy Birmingham on the podcast. Jeremy Birmingham on the podcast, been covering Ohio State for probably 13 or 14 years, one of the most respected guys on the beat. But it's very well known that he is very in tight with the current regime. He is close with Ryan Day. He's close with Justin Furr. Like, he is in with this regime. He doesn't want to see him go anywhere. And I understand. It's also a reason why you're not supposed to get close with your subject, because it can influence you subconsciously, how you report things, whatever. That's journalism school crap. And I don't think anybody plays by those rules anymore, though I still think there's a lot of credence to it. It doesn't seem to be the way things are done anymore. However, he said all year long, Ryan Day needs to win this game. If he doesn't, he should be fired. Or if he doesn't, he will be fired. That's what we said all year. Then on their show immediately after, he started talking about the game in a way that pissed a lot of people off. And basically, his broader point is, because the landscape now allows you to make it to the playoffs and lose that game, we need to change the way we talk about the game, because the game simply doesn't matter as much. Now, those aren't his words. This is me interpreting his broader point. And
Like, I hate the idea of devaluing the rivalry, but like we also have to accept reality in this new world. And I keep going back to 3 weeks ago when the Buffalo Bills beat the Chiefs, right?
Yeah.
When the Chiefs win their third straight Super Bowl, are they going to care that they lost to the Bills in the regular season? And the answer is no.
And this is why I didn't want to go to the 12-team playoff. One of the reasons why, because I knew that it would devalue certain things about the regular season, and definitely huge rivalry games. One, because you get a rematch potentially in the playoffs, and that devalues it the first time around. But here's the thing, and this is why I find the point, number one, disingenuous, because he is a supporter of Ryan Day, right? So to come out and say that after 4 straight losses looks like you're trying to move the goalpost for the guy you support. Number two, Ohio State, nothing's changed here, man. We were in a 4-team playoff 2 years ago. We lost to Michigan. We made the playoffs. That is the same situation as we're in now. So nothing's different on that front. Sure, you're more likely to make the playoffs now in the 12-team format if you lose to Michigan, but this isn't a new thing. Hell, in the BCS in 2006, Michigan almost played Ohio State in the BCS final and would have had Urban Meyer at Florida not done such a good job politicking for Florida and Lloyd Carr refusing to do so at Michigan. It would have been 1-2 after Michigan lost in the game. So the potential of winning a national championship and losing the game has existed. And we just proved that 2 years ago, playing against Georgia in the playoffs after losing to Michigan. So nothing's changed on that front. But Ross Bjork was sitting down with Jeremy Birmingham, with Austin Ward, and basically parroted the same thing, the same sentiment that Jeremy Birmingham had said on that show, which is, do we need to adjust the way we talk about this game?
Clearly, we wanted to play better, and the players know that, the coaches know that. And so then you have to say, okay, what do you learn from? How do you need to tweak anything? Do we need to adjust the way we talk about that game? Not to say, you can't say it's just another game. You can't say that.
You're not gonna
There's no
minimize it.
way you say that. But you look at other rivalries. You know, Army-Navy is getting played this weekend. They have countdown clocks, and they have different things, but yet they play, 11 other games. And so
And what they're doing is trying to minimize the reaction of the game. They're trying to minimize the negative reaction from the game, the blowback from the game, that this game is the be-all, end-all. And while it's true, when I was a kid growing up in the Cooper era, the reason that the game meant so much wasn't just about the rivalry. It wasn't just because we hated him so much. It was because it was the end of a season. It killed the season. It took away all the goals, right? You couldn't win the Big Ten. You didn't beat them, and you didn't win the national championship. And now in this system, that third goal is usually still going to be there, we hope. We would hope that we would have had a good enough regular season to that point that the third goal still remains. So what's the point of getting so hung up on this game when you've still got that to go achieve? And if you try to get the masses to believe this and think this way, then you can minimize the effect that has psychologically on the fan base, because we know it's a bad psychological effect. We've seen it all week. Everybody's been in a horrible mood. A lot of people don't even care about the playoffs, but they're trying to change what the goal should be. Like, let's minimize what that loss means because we have this other goal. A lot of people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that at all. My opinion, you don't need to minimize the game at all. You can still put as much as you always have into it. And the playoffs are a separate issue. And I like it that way. The playoffs, to me, great. It's a whole new season. And it wouldn't feel like this to anybody had Ryan Day not just lost his 4th in a row as a 3-touchdown favorite at home. Nobody would feel this way. What they're trying to pretend is we need to not be feeling like this heading into the playoff when we lose to Michigan. And they're right. They're right. But what they're wrong about is it only feels like this because he's lost 4 in a row and because he just lost as a huge favorite to a very crappy team at home. That is why everybody's so mad. Not just the simple, it's a loss to Michigan. It's the 4th in a row. The next time we go up there, it'll have been 6 years since we've seen a win against that team under him. That's why everybody's so mad this time. This is not just a one-off. This is not just he's 3-3 and you lost your 2nd in a row, or you won 2 in a row and you just lost this one. The reaction is like this because it's 4 in a row. And nothing needs to change about this, in my opinion. This game can always be just as important as it always has. It can mean just as much. And if it is something that gets coaches terminated at Ohio State, I'm fine with it. It is what it is. We cannot allow everything to be stripped away from us in college football because they change the formats around us. The things that have always meant so much to us, the traditions, the stadiums, the uniforms, the helmets, the rivalries, it's up there on top of the list, man. And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special, in my opinion. So don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. And you certainly cannot come out and try to devalue this game when you have lost 4 in a row. That is the softest looking thing I've ever seen in my life. To try to minimize it and devalue it because you've lost 4 in a row. If you want to do this when you're on top, that's one thing. But to try to do it when you are on the bottom just certainly looks like you are trying to run cover for the guy you support. And I'm not saying I don't support him. I'm just saying that's what it looks like. And it's not a good look. Certainly not a good look. Anyway, guys, that's all I got to talk about today. That just irked the shit out of me, and I wanted to talk about it. Hey, it's Juck.
Juck? Who is Juck?
Juck on Bucks.
Juck on Bucks. Juck on Bucks?
Juck.
Juck
on Bucks.
My guy, Juck.
Juck on Bucks.
My buddy Juck.
Juck is the Juck.
Juck on Bucks.
Okay.
Juck is junk.
The Juck eyes.
Juck on Bucks.
Junk. Not junk.